What is up, fam? Thank you so much for tuning in to So Real Sports Talk. Had a little bit of technical difficulties there, but we got it all together at the end. I have the all-knowing Rich Madrid over here to the left of me. Thank you so much, Rich, for jumping on. How are you doing this morning?
I'm great, Sunil. How are you, man?
I'm doing fantastic, man. Excited to talk 49ers with you. I've been following your Twitter comments and discussions that you're having. So I'm glad to get you face to face to go over some things. So we'll start out, Rich. Yesterday, I believe Josh Rosen was cut from the team to make room for some other players. They brought in a corner. But the silver lining, or I guess the big news about this is now the 49ers are down to 3 quarterbacks on their roster, Trey, Jimmy, and Sudfeld. Knowing, with COVID protocols, injuries in the NFL, so on and so forth, you got to at least have 3 quarterbacks. So to me, this is a move that means Jimmy Garoppolo's here for at least this whole season, now that they're only down to these 3 quarterbacks. So with that being said, and with the QBs up in the air and so much discussion about them, how do you feel Shanahan, or do you agree with the way Shanahan is handling this QB situation here with the 49ers?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't think Rosen was going to last anyways. Whether it was going to be Sudfeld or Rosen, one of them was going to be cut. So whether that means Jimmy's staying or going, I guess it doesn't really matter at this point. They haven't really shown any inclination to be, at least publicly, trying to move him. So I think right now we can assume that he's going to be there week 1, whether he's a starter or not, and it doesn't really matter. I do think this team has a little bit of PTSD with the quarterback situation, with injuries and things like that. And so keeping a third one, who they would have kept anyways on the practice squad, I guess. I don't remember what the rules are this year for the practice squad, but, whether it was Rosen or Sudfeld, it wasn't really going to matter.
Do you, because I know, and we're going to get into like the play, but I know before the preseason game, you were pretty high on Trey Lance should be the starter just because of the dynamic that he's given. Obviously, there's a different message from Kyle Shanahan and Lynch in previous press conferences. Now, closer and closer to week 1 coming, the messaging is kind of changing. There's more room for Trey Lance to get in, yet he's not playing with the 1. So overall, do you kind of agree with the way that they're I guess playing this out in the public, as well as the moves that they're making behind the scenes, who gets to play with the 1s, and the way that they're using Trey Lance and Jimmy in preseason up until this point?
Yeah, I mean, you saw in the game that Trey kind of struggled with a few different things, and for the most part, I still thought he played really well. I just think that right now, most of the reps are going to go to Jimmy until shown otherwise. And then Trey could be very close. We don't know. I think the practices are closed to fans now, so we're not getting a lot of the reporting that we did the last 3 weeks. But I think they're really just Trey. They were really putting Trey in to see what he was going to be able to do after not playing for nearly 2 years. Minus the 1 game he had last year, and it was kind of vanilla and bland. And they don't really want to run him. They're being cautious with a lot of that, and they really just wanted to see how he was going to operate as a passer. And I think that's perfectly fine. I think he did a lot of good things. So it's not anything to be concerned with right now. I just think that in week 1 of preseason, Kyle's just trying to get through it and get on to the next week, so they can start getting into a little bit more of how they're going to structure, game planning and practices throughout the season, which is really what the next 2 weeks are about anyways.
Beautiful. And I'm glad you touched on, and we're going to go more in depth with the QBs coming up. But one thing I did want to get your perspective on is obviously with the way that Shanahan kind of limited Trey Lance, right? We didn't see any of the option plays that we've been hearing so much about in the preseason, or at least in the training camp. We didn't really see Trey break the line of scrimmage as far as with his legs. So it seems like you're on board with that, right? Let's focus on what Trey needs to work on out of the pocket, knowing that we have that weapon in the back pocket as far as his mobility and being able to use him in, option plays.
Yeah, I really just think, again, week one was just a way to test him and see how he was going to react in certain situations. I think Shanahan said it in the post game presser, was that we deliberately did that to him because we wanted to see some things, basically, which is fine. I mean, let the guy get a few reps. He hasn't played football in a while, and maybe this week is different. I don't think we're going to see too much of the running plays with the quarterback. Even when he was offensive coordinator with the Washington football team back in 2012 or whatever, they didn't really showcase much of RG3's ability in preseason either. It was kind of the same what we saw, last weekend. So, the Shanahans, they're very secretive with a lot of things, and some things they're not so secretive about. But when it comes to depth chart and things like that, you're kind of seeing it playing out with the quarterback situation, and they're not really going to tip their hand on how exactly they're going to integrate, Lance if he's not the starter week one.
Got you. So my conspiratorial tentacles are going up, thinking that the reason why they're not showing those dynamics of Trey is because in their mind they are trying to get him ready to be the starter, because they're focusing on the things that they know he needs the most work at, and using preseason to really hone that in, knowing that the option plays and all that kind of stuff are things that he can run, in his sleep. And why give defensive coordinators a look at what they're going to look like week one or even through the season? Let them try to figure it out on the fly while Trey is kind of already lighting the league on fire. Do you think that could be a possibility, or do you think it's just more they still have their mindset that Jimmy's going to be the starter? Let's just work this guy like he's the future, maybe next season.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, even watching we, aside from the quarterback situation, what I personally think is going to happen is Jimmy's going to start week one, and he's going to be on an incredibly short leash. Um, and then how it turns out from there or progresses from there is anyone's guess. But, with even watching some of Trey's reps in the passing game on Saturday night, they're just the basic vanilla passing concepts they get through in the first 2 weeks of the install. They weren't really doing a whole lot of um, you know, I don't know if game planning is the right word, but they were showing looks that they always show in the regular season and preseason. So it's not stuff that's going to be complicated and be hidden, that they could install in a weekly game plan. It's all just going to be the base concepts, and how does even with Garoppolo. I mean, the very first play was a designed play action rollout. I mean, that's stuff we see from them all the time, and
Right.
Shanahan's not going to
Go too deep in the
go
bag.
too deep in the bag. Yeah, I think you can tell he hates preseason. He's just trying to get through it, and I think that's the right mentality. I mean, they've got a lot more players they need to evaluate and see who's going to fill out the back half of this roster. So one series with the starters was all they got, and then I expect maybe they'll get a quarter this week, and they'll probably get the half next week against the Raiders. Um, but it's really about getting Trey in there and probably seeing a little bit more and more what he can do with within the pocket, And I think it's going to keep coming behind the second and third team O line. Now that Trent Williams is uh, sidelined with a little bit of an injury, they're not going to play him the rest of the preseason. Probably they got a good month to get him ready. Um, so it's going to keep. Some of these things are going to keep showing up that some fans didn't like on Saturday night with Trey's play, but it is what it is. I just think they're just doing it to just get through the preseason and see what they have with Trey as a passer in the short term.
Yeah, and Coach Timo agrees with you as well. Of course, Shanahan is handling our QBs the right way. He is weaning Trey on the NFL, on what the NFL is all about. Full confidence in our coaching staff. That is what we brought Scrags back this year too. So, vote of confidence from Coach Timo. So let's get into it. I know you were talking a little bit about the play. But how do you feel the play of the QBs have been up until this point? A lot of people are kind of glossing over that Jimmy played in that, first series as well. But overall, with the two quarterbacks that are playing, what are your grades? How do you feel about them up until this point?
The first preseason game, you just kind of want to see what they look like on the field. And Jimmy, I mean, it was whatever. He had a couple of passes that were high and behind the receivers the first time or the first two passes, and then the third check down was nobody was open, so he checked it down. So that's fine.
I think we may have lost Rich for a second. Let's see if he gets back. Oh, there we go. Rich, you back?
Yeah.
You glitched out right there like the Matrix.
Oh, didn't know that.
So you left off saying,
rambling on.
You read the last part we heard was Jimmy G did the check down and everything was fine for what you saw so far.
Yeah, it was fine. I mean, it's nothing too complicated, just kind of bland. Get him through the first series and see what they can do. You know, he's a guy that hasn't played in a year, almost a year too, since leaving in November with the ankle injury or end of October or whatever it was.
Mm-hmm. How did he look to you? Because, obviously he had come back after a few games of being the initial injury happening, and he didn't look good, right? He didn't look mobile. He looked kind of hesitant in the pocket. It didn't seem that way in the first. Obviously, we only saw him for one series, but it seemed like he was moving well, at least well for Jimmy, and, was pretty confident. Did you get that same notion from watching him play that he's healthy?
Yeah, I didn't really see any issue. I mean, he's had a full 8 months to recover, and he looked noticeably, bulkier coming into what was it, OTAs or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And then everyone's saying that he's been moving decently well in practice, so I don't think there's any issue there. I didn't really see any issue with it. He looks comfortable on that ankle. Did he have the knee brace on in the game? I wasn't really.
I don't believe so.
I don't think he did. So.
Yeah, I don't think he. I think he was playing brace free. So all good signs, because there is a real reality that he may be the game one starter. But we obviously got to see a lot more of Trey Lance. Tell me what your overall thoughts were as far as what you saw out of him.
I thought it initially it seemed like it started kind of rough for him, but when you go back and you look at some of the all 22 footage, he looked a little more comfortable than I thought he did. He was progressing through his reads on a lot of those plays. And just unfortunately that when they started trickling the starters out of the offensive line, then the quality of the offensive line play dipped noticeably, and we'll cover that here in a minute. But and then consequently, so did his play. I mean, some of the throws he was rushed on, some he was flushed up into the pocket and tried to get a pass off. That's to be expected. That line behind the starters isn't great, and they're kind of in trouble there. But and that's going to reflect in how the quarterback plays. I mean, there's a couple of plays where the sacks are probably on the line, but 3 or 4 games from now, Trey maybe makes that play and hits his hot receiver, because there was a couple that I felt he could have probably gotten rid of the ball, but he's getting the timing down of everything, and I don't necessarily put that on him. I mean, you don't want your lineman getting beat right at the snap anyways, but one of the reasons why they drafted him was because of his ability to step up in the pocket. So he's going to learn, he's going to figure that timing out, I think, and he'll be fine. But first game action in a while, how much stock do you really put in that?
Right. And one thing that I think a lot of people may not take into play is, even with the year that he played as a starter at NDSU, he averaged 16, 17 passes per game. They were pretty much
blowing teams out.
Right. And also, he used his weapon as far as mobility very, very well. So it's not like he's gotten a lot of reps throwing. And I think some of those just lack of experience kind of showed in what you were saying. Like, even Jack Hammer was on earlier this week with me, and he was saying there was some reads that he missed. Sometimes he could have thrown the ball, throw a guy open kind of throws that he's just not necessarily comfortable making right now. But did you see, stuff out of him that you feel like he is going to progress and, he could be a legitimate starter even this year?
Oh, absolutely. I think that you can see it. You could see it in the game too. When some of those breakdowns occurred in the processing that he was going through, he seemed to be kind of figuring it out already. And if everything we've heard about him is true, then he's going to figure it out. He's a smart kid, and they took him for a reason. So I don't really think there's an issue there. He's mostly gonna get his reps behind the second and third team O line again this week. So we'll see what he's able to clean up with them. If he's able to clean up a lot of stuff with them, then there won't be any issue at all.
Now, I know when we spoke maybe a few weeks ago, Rich, you were pretty high on Trey being the week 1 starter, saying that that's the move that the 49ers should make. After what you've seen and heard through training camp up until this point, are you still with that same take? Would you want Trey Lance to be the week 1 starter?
Yeah, I haven't wavered from that.
Didn't think you would, my friend.
I mean, what's the worst that happens? Jimmy starts and they win. I mean, I just think they're very limited with him, and I think you're going to start seeing it in the regular season with them.
Right. And the way that the schedule just happened to pan out with the first 2 games going up against not maybe the toughest competition, it kind of makes sense to, start him in those 2 games where he's not going against like ridiculous defenses and build some confidence, and still could be very winnable games, even if he does make a few rookie mistakes here and there.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's move on to something that you were touching on. Obviously the 2 biggest components of the offensive line didn't play in Alex Mack and Trent Williams. But now we're hearing, Trent Williams is having some knee swelling. Doesn't seem like a overly serious injury, but the fact that a guy his size is having knee issues without even playing a game quite yet is something to be concerned about. This could be something that is a nagging injury moving forward all season. If Williams isn't available or has some injuries going forward, what do you feel about this offensive line? Is it in trouble with what we saw out of the preseason? And you're already nodding your head. Tell us about it, Rich.
It's in trouble because they had Jalen Moore backing him up there. And if he's going to be the swing tackle, then good luck. He did not have a great first game in the preseason, and a lot of Lance's pressures came when Banks and in particular Moore got beat right off the snap. So yeah, they're not going to. You could potentially be down Mike McGlinchey and it wouldn't matter as much. You could be down right or left guard and it wouldn't matter as much, but left tackle, especially an elite player like that, the play would noticeably be different. And I don't think that there's anyone that can competently fill a void until Trent Williams would come back. It would be rough. Maybe for a game or 2 you could get by, but it would be rough. You'd probably have to lean on the running game quite heavily.
Yeah, and unfortunately, even that offensive line wasn't getting the push to even help out the running game. Trey Sermon was getting pretty much hit at the line of scrimmage and doing what he can to, break through tackles and stuff. But it was tough for him to be able to when, right at the line, or they're even getting pushed back into him. He's tripping over the offensive line's, feet and whatnot. But I think Alex Mack is obviously a huge piece that is going to help in the run game. These were all backups that probably didn't have so much continuity in there. They were getting thrown in with a couple of the starters as well. Is it all doom and gloom, Rich? Or, with a guy like Alex Mack there, do you expect, and even if they like mix and match, like, maybe Brunskill moves to left tackle where he's played a little bit and, had some decent games. But I think the biggest issue is Aaron Banks doesn't seem to be the player that we expected to be right from the start. Can you tell us a little bit about, obviously you were high on him just like I was. He's kind of disappointing at this point. What are you seeing out of him, and what does he need to change to be able to, be an asset for this team?
It looked like in the game that he was trying to do process too much, or maybe that's what they threw at him for 3 weeks. It was just overwhelming. He looks like a guy that's going to need to be eased into, a contributing role. I don't know. I mean, I don't really know because there was nothing that I was worried about in his tape. Yeah, he had issues, but in his college tape, but nothing that panned out like this in the game. I mean, other than that, he was going against, second team and third team NFL D linemen, which are better than the best guys, most of the best guys you play against in any given conference, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I mean, somehow he earned a PFF grade in the passing game of 0.0. So I don't know. I mean, he didn't have a lot of good reps, and I was talking with someone over the weekend too, and they said that, well, he looked a little worse in training camp for the previous 2.5 weeks than he did in the game, and I was like, that's
Well,
appalling.
and
Like, he looked better in the game than he did in camp, and
he didn't look that good in the game.
he didn't look that good in the game. So, really the only position you need to worry about with the starters is right guard and Brunskill. And even Brunskill, he's decently good enough to be a starter. And so that, if they're all healthy, if McGlinchey, Brunskill, Mack, Tomlinson, and Williams, that's a pretty good line.
Right.
That's definitely a step up from last year. So if they're consistently healthy and they're playing the majority of games together, there shouldn't be too much of an issue. But once you start getting into second and third backups in there, it's going to dip again.
Yeah, and I mean, unfortunately, the offensive line for every team beyond the starters is pretty thin. So it's not really you can make some moves to even bring in depth or some guys that you could use as like a safety net. This is pretty much the squad that we have. And I think the biggest thing, Rich, and I'm sure you agree too, is that continuity. Like, these guys need to play with each other. I think timing is a big deal with the offensive line, being able to be on the same page as far as when you see something, process it in the same way. Because if two people are off as far as reading what they're reading, that obviously blows up the play. And I'm hoping Alex Mack can really solve a lot of those issues just with his, his ability to just be an all-pro and his processing ability and leadership. But once again, this could just be a product of just not having our two best players, right? I was using the analogy, you look at the Lakers, and if LeBron James and AD aren't playing, that team doesn't look very good. But when they are playing, all of a sudden you think you could win a championship. Well, Trent Williams and Alex Mack are the LeBron and AD of that offensive line. So it could be bring those two guys, and all of a sudden we have a brand new offensive line.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. I mean, they're two of the best at their positions, and even though they're in their, I think Mack is mid-30s and Trent Williams is just over 31 or 32.
Mm-hmm.
Those are guys that he could easily be playing for the next. At least Mack could be playing for the next 3 years, and Williams will play for the next 6 or 7, hopefully.
Mm-hmm.
He's had some health issues in there or whatever, and hopefully those don't come back. But at the same time, like, they did bring Lance in for a reason, and that reason was to generate more offense than what they're currently getting. So, yeah, I mean, you always want perfect line play for your quarterback, but if Brunskill does get beat, you're more than likely going to see the same issues from Garoppolo and not hitting the check down or not getting rid of it fast enough. I mean, it happens. I mean, you have a quarterback that you're paying all this money, and you can't keep using the excuse that the offensive line just doesn't give him time when he just doesn't see open reads. So that's what they want. That's what they're hoping that Lance gives them, is the ability to kind of extend that and then find somebody open and make a play. Because oftentimes, even pre-injury with Garoppolo, oh, here we go with the vacuum.
It's all good, man. It's not that loud.
Okay, yeah, pre-injury with Garoppolo, you could see it, and he just wasn't comfortable after moving on from first or second read to try to find the check down if there was a lineman in his face, and because he's just not mobile.
Yeah. From what you know about Trent Williams' injury, is that something that you're worried about? Is that something that you think could linger, or, by the time, week 1 starts, he'll be fine?
No, it was mostly just his issues with whatever he was dealing with in Washington before they traded for him, with the health problems he had. I think he had a brain tumor or whatever, or
a
cyst on his skull or something. I don't remember, but you just hope something like that doesn't affect him or come back and rear its ugly head again. Because sometimes those things can happen, and we just don't know. But obviously he's been given a clean bill of health to play football again, so just hoping and praying that that's not the case.
Got you. And I did want to just say, obviously I love all of you guys in the chat, but we do want to keep it respectful. Everybody here is just here to have fun, learn from a guy like Rich. So I am blocking people if, it gets out of hand and you guys start using disrespectful language or, going at each other in a way that, I just don't want to be a part of. So sorry, Rich. I just wanted to put that out there for everybody in the chat.
No, it's all good. I barely I it. I just saw a few minutes ago that you blocked someone, so
yeah,
I don't even know what they said.
Yeah, well, hopefully we don't have to hear from it again. All right, so moving on to something that I feel was a big bright spot, and I don't know if you knew this about me, Rich, but I've been on an island a lot of times in these All 49ers roundtables and All 49ers SI talking about the secondary and the depth of the secondary. People keep saying that it's, very razor thin. And I was really high on the guys they brought in through the draft. Once again, want to give credit where credit is due. Eric Crocker did some great breakdowns on Ambry Thomas and Lenore and gave me confidence that these guys are actually going to be able to jump in and play a significant role if called upon behind the starters. And then you got a guy like Hufanga who played, I think, really, really well, was all over the field in the secondary, who might even, contend for a starting role now that, there's some injuries in the safeties as well. But what were your overall takes as far as the play of the secondary in the first preseason game?
I'm going to have to find somewhere to sit with the noise. So can we
pause it, man. Do what you need to do.
Everyone for that.
Nah, you're fine. You're fine. Coach Timo said, agree, Crocker is the go-to on evaluating the secondary. He knows his stuff for sure. And absolutely, Eric Crocker is somebody who I would love to have on the show. So if you guys could tag him in these things and say, Sunil wants Crocker on the show, but he does an amazing job as a former cornerback in the league to be able to really give an insight on the cornerback position specifically and the secondary overall. He give pretty high grades, or at least high evaluations about Ambry Thomas and Lenore, and it was really great to see that. So if you haven't subscribed to his channel, make sure you do. I believe it's called Croc TV or Eric Crocker. I'm sure you could type it in to YouTube and find it, or just go on to his Twitter, and all the links are there as well. But yeah, we're getting a real live view of Rich Madrid doing his best Blair Witch Project rendition right here, except all the lights are on and the camera is actually a lot clearer. But we lost him for just a second. If any of you guys have some questions, we will shout out some people right now. Niner by Nature, always a super supporter of the channel. What's up, my guy? Hope everything is well for you. He believes Trey is the starter week 1. I'm hoping for the same thing, Niner. Cinnamon Kiss, thank you so much for tapping in today. I appreciate you coming on the show as well. Madison, hello, faithful. Hello to you as well. Who else we got? We already shouted out Coach Timo. Big Play Slay. Appreciate you jumping on the show as well. Thank you guys for being so patient with us. Rich will come back on in a few minutes, and we got a few more topics to talk about with him. And we got him back. We got the little outdoor get up now too. I like it. The stunt to be able to show indoor, outdoor.
We live in a multi-generational household here, so they have a cleaning crew that comes like every other week. Today was that day, and I didn't realize that. So
awesome, man. Well, we're talking about the secondary. Your overall takes is what you saw from them coming from this first preseason game.
Yeah, I heard the plug for Crocker, and he's probably the guy that you want to talk to about this because he's been immersed in cornerback and safety play for a long time, given his background and everything. But I'll try to do as best I can with that one. I thought Ambry Thomas played pretty well, and so did Lenore, which was kind of surprising. Because everything we'd been hearing about Lenore was that he'd been getting worked in practice and one-on-ones and things like that. So for him to come out and have a decent first game was big for him. Hufanga, I think, stole the show, though. I think he was one of the best players on the field for the defense. And that was probably the biggest surprise for me because I did not know how he was going to translate to an NFL defense. I just thought he was a guy who fit more of something they might have tried to do in 2011, as a bigger safety. But it looked like he'd slimmed down over the year, from the combine to now, and he looks like a guy who could probably play the deep safety role really well, at least given what we see in the first game.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it was the, Troy Polamalu hair, but he definitely stood out on the field. He was all over the place, which was amazing to see. And he seems like a guy who has that engine that gives 100% every single play. And I think that's, if Jimmy Ward, who obviously didn't play, if they end up being the starting safeties, that's going to be pretty exciting because, Jimmy Ward is the same type of player as far as attitude wise and flying all over the field. So that could be exciting. One player, I mean, he's not part of the secondary, but I wanted to get your take on him. Filled in for Fred Warner, who wasn't playing that game, Jonas Griffith. What did you feel about his play? Did he stand out to you? Because he was somebody who I thought made some pretty good plays as well.
Yeah, I thought he looked very good. I didn't really know too much about him before training camp, so hearing his name pop up quite a bit as a guy who was making plays in practice kind of caught my eye, and then he started making plays in the game. So it all translates. It carries over. You practice well, you'll play well. And he seems to be, so far, playing really well. I think he's probably earned a role on the team as Warner's backup or somebody that can fill in there. Some of the other guys, don't know if we saw much of Harris that much. I need to go back and watch a little bit more of the defensive film, but I think Harris got some reps in there at linebacker. I don't think he's going to stick. And a couple of the other guys, I think most of the starters were out. I don't think Greenlaw was in there.
Yeah, they weren't. They weren't there.
Alshire's been hurt.
Right.
So none of, you just really saw a lot of the backups, and a few of those guys had got some decent reps in there.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the Griffith play is something that I'm excited about because the linebacking core is a little bit thin as far as like people we've seen play linebacker after, Alshire, Dre, and obviously Fred Warner. So seeing a guy that could step up and, play a role just in case, God forbid any of these guys did get injured, that looked like he could be a competent player, is something good to see because, a lot of people have been kind of bashing the depth of the 49ers past the, starters and whatnot, but we're seeing that there's some talent back there. And, maybe there's a reason why the 49ers haven't been out here just trying to get every single free agent. They knew what they had on their team and, they're confident with that.
Yeah, I think they're fine as long as Tart and Ward stay healthy. And I think the X factor there is Tart. You still have Clinton Dix, who they signed, and then Hufanga probably slots in, fills that role easily, just based on what we saw. So, and then for linebacker, they did sign Kedrich, and I think he started practicing yesterday.
Got you. So yeah, Griffith asked that. Timo asked that question. Griffith, yes, he fits our style defense. Has Kedrich started practicing yet? Haven't heard anything on him.
Yeah, so he did start practicing this week. I don't know if yesterday was his first day or Monday. I think Monday was probably the day they finally got him in there for physical and everything or whatever, and then started taking practice reps yesterday. So he'll more than likely see some reps in the game this Sunday.
Yeah, and I mean, he's a good depth piece. He obviously had some pretty good seasons with Minnesota. And once again, adding some depth to maybe the only side of the defense, at least, that is a little bit, shaky after the starters. I think is a good pickup for them.
I mean, the only concern is he didn't play. I think he played one game last season, and he had the knee injury at the end of the 2019 season in Week 17 when 49ers were up here.
Mm-hmm. I like his ability to play in coverage too. He's one of those guys that is like a not as good, obviously, as Fred Warner, nowhere in the same league as him, but definitely was able to kind of get into coverage and to be effective as a linebacker in coverage as well. So it's a good option to have if he can play. So let's move on to the receivers, Rich. So, obviously we know who 1 and 2 are between, Ayuk and Debo. However, all the talk up until this point was who's going to slot in at that, 3 position, wide receiver 3 position, and who are going to be the, final 6 to make the roster. We had Jalen Hurd in there, obviously Richie James Jr., but now, after preseason game 1 and seeing what's happening through training camp, it's starting to shake a little bit where some guys are starting to really pull away from the pack, I would say. What have you seen as far as overall out of the wide receivers, and who are you liking, and who do you end up believing will make the final roster?
This is not a good group after the first 2 or 3 guys. Obviously, the top 2, Ayuk and Debo. After that, I mean, you could really I don't think it's really that set in stone. I mean, you've got Sanu, who I think he probably makes it. I don't think Richie James.
He forgot how to catch the ball all of a sudden.
He did not have a good game. But then neither did some of the other receivers. Travis Benjamin didn't look great. Jennings, he probably makes it in there as a 5th or a 6th guy. It's thin, man. And I don't even think Hurd got any reps in the game. I don't think he's practicing. I
think he was
practicing. So he had the thing last week where he missed a few days, and then he got blasted by he got blasted by Wes Welker, and then the next day got blasted by Shanahan for basically saying if he can't find a way to get back on the field, we can't guarantee him a spot, basically.
Right.
And then he started practicing the 3 or 4 days leading up to the game, and then I don't think he got any reps in the game. I think they held him out. So, and that's not a good sign.
Mm-hmm.
Unless they've seen something in those 4 days that makes them kind of say, okay, we can sit him out this one and get him physically ready for the next one and get him some reps. But with him, it's just such a wild card because he hasn't, they didn't have any preseason games last year, but he missed part of the training camp last year with an injury. Didn't play last year. Didn't get any official snaps in 2019 after the preseason ended because of his injuries. It's going to be tough. There's not a lot, but then again, there's not a lot of depth back there. They need guys. They probably might want to consider carrying 7 guys and not 6.
Now, there is one player that I think.
They just lost Austin Watkins for the season, so he's another guy you can't rule in to make the roster.
Now, one guy that I feel like is kind of separating themselves that we didn't expect is Trent Sherfield.
Yeah, so I think he's definitely going to make it. I don't think there's any question about that.
And I think he could be a real productive player as well. It seems like he gives a dynamic that, I think what they wanted Travis Benjamin to be is that like burner that could go deep. And it looks like, without even knowing it, Sherfield can play that role. And he was on the stacked behind Fitzgerald and D-Hop and Kirk and stuff on Arizona, and didn't really get to show out too much just because he had bigger names that probably were playing better than him. But it seems like he's taking full advantage of his opportunity with the 49ers. And I think that, that top 4, I know you said it's pretty thin. I think Sanu and Sherfield, and you could even add Jennings in there. aren't necessarily like people that are just going to be on the field for every single like down, but they all have a special role that they could play in positional football. With Jennings and Sanu down in like the red zone, I think would be really great options, as well as Sherfield, being able to be that burner down the line. So I know you're saying this wide receiver core is thin and weak, but I think that they're gonna be all right, man. Especially if Trey's there, I think he could utilize these guys really well.
Yeah, I mean, this is an offense. They're going to spread the ball around. Did I say that right? Juice check.
Yeah.
I sometimes say it like it's spelled. He's going to get his fair share of targets. Kittle, obviously, even Dwelly's a reliable pass catcher. They're going to find a way. They're going to have to find ways to manufacture targets for the third and fourth wide receivers. So, Shanahan's a big 21 personnel guy, which means he's only going to have Debo and Ayuk out there if they're both healthy as receivers, and then you're going to have Kittle, either Mostert or Sermon, and then the fullback, and he's going to go 5 wide with that a bunch. So it's going to be tough to manufacture targets for guys that are outside the third spot, probably.
So Coach Timo says James is slacking to me and on special teams, way too bland. Jennings has looked good. Hurd is a mystery. I don't get him. Great opportunity, but zero. Sherfield has been good. And Simba is a guy who kind of stood out. Obviously, with Richie James, not playing well as a receiver, not showing much even in the kicking game. Simba came out and played really well. I know he has some fumble issues with the Rams, but was there anything out of him that impressed you? And is he somebody that you would like to see make the team, Rich?
Who is that?
So he was the guy who came from the Rams as a punt return and kick return specialist. He had that sweep that went for.
And then he misread the punt. He's not going to be a guy that ever gets on the field as a receiver. As a kick returner, if could be valuable there. It didn't look promising after the first game, but and then as a punt returner, I wouldn't be surprised if Ayuk gets some reps back there as a punt returner.
Mm-hmm.
Richie James, I've never been a fan, and he's a guy that comes in once in a while. He gets his reps, and when people are hurt, and then even oftentimes when guys are hurt, he doesn't. There's some games he just hardly gets any reps.
Right.
And I think that's just kind of been the case with him the whole time. I've heard from people that attend in-season practices that he's not even very good in practice. And, Coach Timo would probably speak to this. If you don't practice good, you're not going to see the field in a game. And that's just true at every level, I think. And he's just been a guy who's just kind of floated around to me. They've kept him around because they've needed him. And I don't, with the depth, the hit that the depth took this year, I still think he's a guy that's probably expendable. I just think.
Yeah, it seems like, he doesn't have a great rapport with Trey Lance. Doesn't seem like he could catch the ball with the velocity that Lance is throwing at him. Not only in the preseason game, you've been hearing that through training camp from all the insiders that are watching there, that he's dropping a lot of the passes from him. Knowing that Trey Lance is the future, whether it's game 1 or, week 1 or, middle of the season, if you can't catch the ball that he's throwing, you're probably not going to make it onto the field too often either. So, but Rich, that's what I had for you. Was there anything else that, stood out to you, or your overall impressions from week 1 that you wanted to discuss?
No, I think we hit the highlights. I think that was a good recap of the first week. Kind of what we all expected.
Yeah. Madison, literal, I think is how you pronounce it, or literal. Sorry if I'm butchering that, Madison, but thoughts on signing cornerback Devonta Harris. Obviously this is why Rosen was cut, bringing in this guy who previously played for the Ravens. Do you know much about him, Rich?
I do not. It just sounds like a way to test the depth and see what else is out there. I think they're kind of thin at corner after Mosley and Verrett, and some of the younger guys that are rookies. I think they want to really kind of test and see what else they can find to add some depth.
Yeah, I think they just want to carry more corners overall. Some of these guys might even be utilized in the receiving or kick returning game as well.
Yeah,
He
special
came,
teamers.
yeah, special teamers. He came from the Ravens, who seem to always produce really good corners. So I'm
Yeah.
sure he's picked up a lot over there, and whatever added he could bring to the team, if he makes it, I think will be a benefit. So, Rich, I know you're always writing. I know you're always putting out new articles. Can you tell us a little bit about what you got coming up?
Yeah, I just had a piece published yesterday at Niners Nation on the touchdown pass that Lance had, a little more in-depth breakdown of the concept. And then I'm working on a piece on how Lance fits into the offense if he does not start and what it would look like, running the zone read and things like that. I'm working on. And then I'm still trying to finish up a run game piece, kind of something I was working on last season and building off of in this new article for it. So trying to get both of those pieces done before the season. The sooner I get them done, the more I can relax a bit before we, week one. So
anything else going on, like rule changes and things like that you're posting on? I guess, is it NFL Stripes or
Football Zebras?
Football Zebras. There it is.
Working on something there about special teams rule that I got some insight on from someone. So I'm trying to not a player or anything, just a rules change that happened that could have be impactful on special teams, especially with field goals and things like that.
The nerdy stuff I enjoy a lot, Rich. So that's why I always ask you about what articles you got coming up on there. Hopefully you could do one on this taunting penalty, man, because that looks like it's gonna be, it's gonna be a major. It's gonna suck. I think that that could be, the way that they're, that one play I guess in the preseason that's like going around where the guy like broke a tackle and then kind of flexed on somebody and they called the taunting penalty there. I just think that I think that's a little bit too stretch. It reminds me of, back in the day when, who was it? It was like Ocho Cinco, Terrell Owens, Steve Smith. They were all doing like the best touchdown celebrations and they were just going back and forth. And then the NFL took out the touchdown celebration and then it was like super boring and then they brought it back. I feel like they're going to have to do the same thing with this as well because, it's not, as long as they're not like actually going physically in the dude's face or whatever, like, you got to give this a highly emotional sport. These guys, are getting, some of them under 10 touches a game. For them to make a huge play, you got to let them celebrate,
Yeah, but that's what preseason's for too, with the rules and the officials, is to recalibrate on some of these changes that they had. They might, they're definitely going to take a look at a lot of the penalties, especially the points of emphasis this year, and decide, we can probably throw this not throw it out of the rule book, but de-emphasize certain things. I don't know about the low block one. I think that's going to stay. I don't think they're going to try to tweak anything with that or look for anything to let go on that one. But the taunting one, they'll look at them and go, okay, yeah, they can get away with this. And there's some other rules that they're going to do that on. So that's what preseason serves a purpose for on that end. And they'll get guidance before week one and say, these are the things based on preseason that we're going to de-emphasize because it's going to slow the game down or whatever. Or they just don't want to call it because it's too subjective or whatever. So you never know. I mean, it might not last.
I'm hoping not. But where else will you get this kind of insight on rule changes and rule enforcement other than the man, Rich Madrid? Coach Timo wanted to thank you for your service, Rich. Good stuff, guys. I appreciate it, Timo. Obviously,
thanks, Coach.
Rich over there is the hero. And hit the like, fam. I appreciate that, Coach Timo. If anybody enjoys the work that we do here, please like, please subscribe, please share. It really helps us out and all those analytics and nerd things that go on YouTube. Rich, I really appreciate you making the time this morning, man. Like always, you're always bringing the fire. Guys that are tuned in right now, I'm going to be going live with Silverado Kev in about an hour at 12 o'clock. He was at the game. He's going to give us his takes on what he saw live there in Levi Stadium. But other than that, Rich, appreciate you, my man. Thank you so much, guys, for tuning in, and we will see you next time.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Sunil. Appreciate it, man.
Absolutely.